G'day, I'm Mike Tesaro, and I prepared this ACCC cheat sheet for November 2025. And effectively, the way it works is I summarise all the ACCC developments that happened in that particular month. And as you see, I'm a bit behind. I'm doing this 3rd of January, so hopefully I'll catch up the next week or so. And I wanted to include that image of Oprah Winfrey going a bit crazy, really. But she was recently in Australia on a speaking tour, so I thought it was appropriate maybe to have her as on the intro slide to this presentation. Bit of background about myself. I'm a competition and consumer lawyer, and I've been running my own practice of Sarah Legal Consulting for the last 18 years. And I help companies, individuals, in competition and consumer law matters. I also do some expert consultancy work for various legal publishers on competition and consumer law. I also have a part-time role with the New South Wales Civil Administrative Tribunal, the Commercial and Consumer Division. So I get a chance to apply the Australian consumer law in real-life situations through that role. Prior to that, I worked at ACCC 15 years in a variety of roles, including in enforcement and mergers. Our line's a bit different. There were no court cases in November. There was only a couple of enforcement matters, one merger. There's quite a bit happening in relation to product safety and, again, not too much in the scams, inquiries and authorisations. And interestingly, 2 access type matters were covered in November. First matter, I can't say too much. This involves the Wiggles. The reason being that I've been hired by the Wiggles to assist them with their compliance. So I won't say too much about my current client. But here on the 11th of November, the Wiggles admitted that they likely breached the Australian consumer law by selling these Emma Bow headbands, which didn't have the mandatory safety warnings about button batteries. And I guess these headbands were sold in between 2022 and 2024, and it was acknowledged that they didn't have the relevant warnings, which is very important to tell people to be aware that there are button batteries in a product so the parents can be extra vigilant. And so the Wiggles have agreed to an 87B undertaking, which includes a range of remedial steps and introducing a compliance program. But also they've agreed to produce an episode of its podcast Wiggle Talk, a podcast for parents, in which they're going to be talking about the Emma Bow headband and also discussing safety issues in relation to button batteries. So it's a fairly novel remedy that has been agreed between the ACCC and Wiggles. John Holland, this is an agreement by John Holland to terminate an agreement with the CFMEU, whereby John Holland agreed only to use 3 specific labour hire companies on 2 very large infrastructure projects in New South Wales. So basically, CFMEU had said to John Holland, we want you to use these 3 companies because we like them. They're fully unionised. They're paying particular wages. We have an EBA with them. We like these guys. Don't use anybody else, or else probably. And John Holland's agreed to get rid of these agreements. Now, these are big projects, M1 Pacific Motorway Extension and also the M7, M12 integration project. So they're big projects. The thing to realise here is these are everywhere. Like, the CFMEU has agreements with everybody, either written or no judge wink type agreements where they just won't let anybody who's not affiliated with their union onto the site. So this is a big warning to a lot of building companies and to the unions. They've got to get rid of these things. Chances are this one probably less than competition. These are big projects, and you're knocking out a lot of labour hire businesses from being able to compete for that work. But I guess it's a light remedy. But I don't think next time the ACCC comes across one of these agreements, it's going to be light remedy. I think they're going to be going a bit harder, probably enforcement action, maybe litigation. And John Holland's agreed not to do this again in the future, which makes sense because it's clearly illegal. Was one merger, Southern Cross Media and 7 West Media, and so Southern Cross wanted to buy 7 West, and these are sort of more traditional types of media outlets, and so they're not quite, the market power they used to have is really not there anymore due to the rise of social media, streaming services, things like that. So the ACCC let the merger through. They concluded that the 2 companies were not really close competitors for content. Southern Cross was really focused on radio and audio, whereas 7 was more in print and general TV. And as you can see, the ACCC noted the impact of broad industry trends on competition. So the rise of streaming services, significant growth on online advertising. So a lot of these mergers that you would never have thought could go through many years ago are going to be pretty mundane nowadays with the rise of social media advertising. The product safety, there's three matters in this area. And the first was very concerning toppling furniture. And this is a standard which requires furniture suppliers to warn people about the need to attach furniture to walls so that if kids are climbing up it, they're using drawers in a cupboard as sort of steps or just climbing on things that it could topple over on them and kill them. So they've got to warn people, also provide some equipment to affix the product to the wall. And so the ACCC undertook some surveillance in relation to this mandatory standard in association with some of the state and territory consumer protection agencies to see how businesses were complying, and the results were really pretty shocking when you think about it. It found that most suppliers were failing to comply with this new mandatory standard. They examined over 3,000 furniture products, 160 businesses, and found that 90% were non-compliant with the standard. That's really, I was a bit surprised it was so high. And this is a big warning to the furniture industry. Like, it's not really that hard to comply. Like, it's information, you just print some information and give it to consumers. So I don't think it's too hard to comply. I can guarantee that next time the ACCC comes across something like this, it's not going to be just warning people, it's going to be taking enforcement action. So companies need to get their house in order when it comes to this particular issue. The next one was a strange one. This was a lot of media in November 2025, and a lot of schools being closed down because they believe they might have this sand on the premises. So, particularly in the ACT, there seemed to be a lot of concern down there. And what occurred was the ACCC published a recall notice about some children's sand products which it believed may contain asbestos. And these were sold at various retailers, including Officeworks. And as you can see, there was a number of retailers selling these sand products to be played with by kids. Officeworks educating kids, modern teaching aids, and Zart art. And there were a number of different products, brightly coloured sand designed for children to play with. And as you can see on that slide, that's what it looks like. And the interesting thing here was actually tremolite asbestos, which is a naturally occurring asbestos. So it must have slipped through all the testing that these companies do with these products. They would have tested for everything. And maybe they didn't test for asbestos, maybe they didn't think it would be in there. But this is a naturally occurring product which they suspected may be in these particular products. So there was a lot of publicity, a lot of activity, and I think hopefully those concerns have been addressed now. The next product safety is quad bikes. This is also very concerning when you read how dangerous these quad bikes are. On 14th November, the ACCC launched a quad bike safety awareness campaign, and it's trying to tell particularly older male farmers in regional Australia to be careful because they're the people who are most often injured and killed by quad bike accidents. As you can see, since 2011, so 14, 15 years, 234 Australians have died in quad bike accidents. That's a lot. Most of them were men, 80%. And as you can see, men, like farmers effectively, over the age of 70 were 20% of the fatalities. So you think one-fifth of the people dying are men over 70 on farms. So it's really warning those people to be very careful, to ensure that they know the limitation of the vehicles, don't go too fast, and all the rest of it. So they're trying to raise awareness to try and save those people's lives, and it's a significant number of people. And the other thing that was concerning is, children under 14, 1 in 10 deaths. So that's concerning. Like, I don't even know kids under 14 should be riding these things at all. I don't know. It doesn't seem very sensible, but that's a lot of young kids dying. So clearly, maybe the best thing is to prevent them from riding the things. But if they do ride them, make sure they're under close supervision. So this is surprising how many deaths, and also the demographics of who's at risk is also somewhat surprising. Uh, there was a warning issued, so the ACCC, in the lead up to the Black Friday sale in November, wanted to warn people to be careful, to avoid, I guess, two things: avoid just misleading, deceptive conduct, but also scams. And the types of things people will have to worry about is these time representations saying you're going to buy this quickly because the price is going to go up if you don't buy it now, and they're often false. The price doesn't go down go up, sorry, after the time has expired. Also, there was a lot of problems previously, the number of enforcement actions that exposed site-wide or store-wide claims that weren't true, and also saying that the price is now discounted off a previous retail price when that's not true. So these are kind of traditional misleading, deceptive conduct. The other thing you'll be very careful about is just, ghost sites, scams, buying things from retailers that aren't well known to you, and then they end up just taking your money. Then there was the report issued on the 18th of November talking about online shopping scams, and the ACCC reported that Australians had lost $260 million in such online shopping scams in the first 9 months of 2025. So that's a concerning number. I'm saying that a lot today, concerning, but anyway, that's a lot of money to be lost. And they looked at the period January to September 2025, and they received 159,000 scam reports with financial losses of 259 million. The thing that is surprising here is it was 16% increase in losses and a 20% decrease in reports. So that's saying that the amount each person is losing through a scam is increasing quite significantly. So that's going the wrong way. You think if there's more information provided and warnings provided to consumers, they'd be more careful, but actually less people are losing more money. We're talking about online content such as fake websites, like ghost websites, advertisements, social media, mobile apps were the most common method used by scammers for initial contact. $122 million through that, or almost 50% of overall losses. And the use of social media accounts to reach unsuspecting victims, that's becoming more common. Compromised social media accounts and the typical or the most usual suspects, Facebook and Instagram. That's where most of this activity seems to be occurring. Now, there was an inquiry and consultation. The petrol report came out. It wasn't anything earth-shattering. It came out on the 11th of November and found that petrol prices are generally cheaper in cities where they have more independence. It doesn't surprise anybody. Most states have a fairly strong independent sector, like obviously Sydney's got the most independence. It also concluded that the market share of smaller independent retailers is growing, and that's a good development, because obviously they're the guys who do drive price competition. So basically, it's accounted for 26% of national retail sales, which has increased from 18%. So that's quite a big increase over that period. And they talked also about the companies that supply wholesale petrol. So there's really 4 companies doing it, but there's only 2 companies that actually have any refining capacity in Australia. So it's a very concentrated market. And these 4 companies supply 88% of petrol and 85% of total wholesale petrol sales. So it's a very concentrated market. So I guess at the wholesale level, there's always a concern that maybe some anti-competitive conduct occurs, but at the retail level, you'd be surprised, particularly with the rise of independence, of any untoward conduct. This is an interesting one. The ACCC announced that it's commencing inquiry as to whether the super fast broadband access service, SPAS, should continue to be regulated. So basically, anything that's above 25 megabytes per second or higher is considered to be a super fast broadband network, and it's currently subject to regulation. The question is whether it should continue, and the current SPAS declaration expires on 20th of July 2026, and there's a discussion paper out questioning whether they should continue the declaration. My view, they probably shouldn't. I think they'll get rid of it. I think there's enough competition in that market, and the declaration is probably not needed. The battery steward, so an authorisation is the battery stewardship scheme. Here, the ACCC agreed to continue this battery stewardship council exemption, to continue this B cycle battery stewardship scheme for another 5 years. And I guess it's got clear purpose of public benefits, try and improve environmental outcomes, as you can see, not just environmental, but also trying to reduce fire risks in relation to batteries, particularly with lithium batteries and things like that. But it's really not the most successful. Like it's got a lot of promise, but it doesn't generate a lot of public benefit. And that's because it's a voluntary scheme and participation rates are very low. So the number of batteries collected and recycled hasn't been very high traditionally. So you're just wondering whether some stage needs a mandatory scheme to get better environmental and safety outcomes. Plastic recycling. So this is a long authorization. Basically, there's been a lot of activity here. Red Cycle went broke. There was big warehouses full of all this soft plastic and just sitting there, and you've got to sort of start working out what to do. And clearly the guys who've got the most interest in this area are the big retailers, Woolworths, Coles, Aldi, and also some of the big manufacturers. So they're all been talking a bit, and getting them all together in a room can, be a bit risky. So they've been authorised to get together and talk about ways of trying to reduce the stockpile, which is huge, and to implement some sort of process to facilitate soft plastic packaging recycling. And they can do it for 8 years, which is longish. And the aim is to increase the collection and recycling of soft plastic. And I guess trying to give the industry responsibility to facilitate this recycling. Some environmental groups don't think that's right. They think the government should be running this whole show here, but I think the government's trying to palm it off to the private sector, see if they can get it over the line. If they can't, government's going to have to step in. A few conditions are associated with the particular authorisation. Must complete annual public reporting about the performance, independent reviewed, third and seventh year of its operation to work out if it's operating well. Must include on the board 2 independent directors, and you can't enter into any exclusive contracts with process. That's obviously potential 47 exclusive dealing type concerns. So not too many conditions, but hopefully this works. If not, as I said earlier, government's going to have to get involved. Another one that was interesting, the ACCC granted an interim authorisation to the Uniting Church to continue to establish and operate a national insurance program. I'm not too sure really whether they had this previously and they've just decided to continue it with an authorisation, or whether it's a brand new idea. It would suggest it's a brand new idea. And obviously, religious denominations getting together to try and provide insurance to their various organisations under their control is a good idea. A lot of benefits, obviously, sharing risk out, reducing premium costs, reducing transaction costs. So a lot of public benefit here. So it's an interim authorisation. Want to see what people think about it, and then if it does seem to me to be generating a lot of public benefit, to collectively negotiate, procure and maintain insurance for not just the church, but also different synods, or boards, organisations, for Uniting Care, things like that. So it seems like a lot of public benefit. I suspect it'll get granted in the longer term. And I just wonder if it's a new thing, whether other denominations might be queuing up to make similar applications in the future. Bulk wheat. So this is an interesting one. Basically, bulk wheat is subject to various access undertaking type obligations, which are quite onerous. And what the ACCC is trying to do is find out whether some of the restrictions that apply to CHSP bulk terminal should be relaxed effectively. So whether it should be provided with exempt service provider status under the Port Terminal Access Bulk Wheat Code of Conduct Code. And the reason that they could get an exemption is if the ACCC believes that there's sufficient competitive constraint in the market. So if they get over the line, they would not be required to comply with Parts 3 to 6 of the code. And this is due to the belief that there's a high level of competitive constraint from Grain Corp operations and Riordan, I can't pronounce that, grain services in the Port of Geelong. So that's going to be interesting. If there's competition, then really you don't need to have companies subject to what is pretty onerous code, really. Now, this is something that I don't fully understand. I'm not really an access type of guy. But anyway, 28th of November, the ACCC released a statement outlining their approach to determining the weighted average cost of capital, the WACC. And remember the ACCC, everybody talked about the WACC and the DORC and all the rest of it, and I just sort of, my eyes glazed over. But effectively, it's important, like when you're dealing with regulated businesses, you've got to sort of work out what sort of return should they be permitted to generate from their investment. So it's good for the ACCC to continue looking at this over time to decide whether it should change its approach. As you can see, the WACC is the input in the calculation of the return on capital, which investors require in order to invest. It provides regulated infrastructure firms the opportunity to attract and retain the capital necessary to finance prudent costs. So you've got to balance up two things. You've got to balance up giving companies sufficient incentive to invest in various infrastructure, but you don't want it, gold plating infrastructure that's going to drive up prices, which has happened in a number of industries. I think electricity is a classic example where people gold plated the infrastructure and prices rose. So it's really important to set an appropriate price that balances up the incentive to invest and the prices that people will ultimately pay for these various services, such as all different types of services. So that's interesting. The ACCC is not just fixed on a particular approach; it's looking at different types of approaches. Now, just a commentary. I guess I can't say too much about the Wiggles, but I guess it's a high-profile target for the ACCC, and I guess a novel remedy there in terms of the video that they got to prepare. John Holland's an interesting case because it's quite prevalent that the unions, particularly the CFMEU, has agreements either written or oral with a lot of different companies saying you've got to use approved providers of services or labour hire companies or waterproofers or you name it, and if you don't, there's going to be trouble. So I think this is a big warning to both building companies and the CFMEU that if any of these agreements come up again, I think there'll be an enforcement approach taken by the ACCC. The product safety was very concerning. Toppling furniture, the level of compliance is really low. The sand with potential asbestos was a big surprise. And the need for companies to maybe test for things that aren't necessarily that apparent in particular products. You've got to really test for so many different things. And the quad bikes then really needs to raise awareness, particularly against this cohort who, I'm over 70, I guess, I'm 60, but, maybe people who aren't the most receptive to getting advice. They've got to really sit up and take note of the dangers associated with driving around on quad bikes. Scams was interesting. The fact that the level of online shopping scams did increase in terms of the amount lost per person is a concern that obviously some people are being more careful, but other people seem to be losing more than ever. And so again, there needs to be more education. Plastic recycling, again, that's hopeful that does resolve the issues in terms of the warehousing of the stockpiles of plastic, soft plastic that's currently in place, and also implementing a scheme to getting rid of the problems in future. But I guess if it doesn't work, then I think the government will have to step in and do something. So, and the environmental groups aren't too keen on, I think they'd probably say the people causing the problem are now responsible for dealing with the problem. I think they think it really should be a government obligation. So that's all for November. Hopefully that's been helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call or drop me an email. Bye-bye.